Welcome to the Nightmare Before Christmas Jack Skellington build. This kit is a 3D printed kit from Nom Nom Figures. I have it all printed up in clear like I usually do, so let's get right into the build. Here's all the parts that we're going to be dealing with. First thing is clean them up and get them primed. For anybody that's new to 3D printing, when you print something you have to use supports, and when I use supports I put little spheres on the end of them. It leaves these little nubs on the tail end of where the support is. I'm just using 400 grit sandpaper. We're going to take those all down on each part, get everything smooth, and do what we got to do priming wise. When we are cleaning up the parts, there are some tight spots that I have to get into, so I'll use my needle metal file. Just be very careful with your metal files. It could cut through the resin pretty quick. You want to go gentle and get the nub off, and that's it. Also, sometimes when you're cleaning up your prints, it gets a little dusty and it's hard to see, so I just keep a little beauty brush by me, get it off, feel it, make sure the nub's down, and then just move on to the next spot. I used pre-supports on the pumpkins, which left a lot of deviations on it, so I ended up having to use the metal files a lot to get everything nice and smooth. During the prep of the file, what I did was I drilled a hole while I was in Cheeto Box the slicer, big enough so that I could fit a 3mm LED in here. This way we could light up our pumpkins. It's not very bright in here. I just wanted to give you an idea of how the LED was going to sit in there and how it's going to light up. Now that we got everything primed up and on sticks, let's start putting this thing together. One of the first problems we run into with 3D prints, a lot of times the keys either shrink or expand. Mostly they shrink. And on this one you can see it's a little wobbly, so I'm going to have to work on the key to get this to fit and stay steady. And on the pillars of this kit you can see there's going to be a huge gap and a lip. We're going to take care of that a little later on with Milliput. Things didn't want to line up right, so I just cut the key off. What we're going to do is we're going to put some DAP Rapid Fuse on there and just put it all together flat. Once I have it together, I just hit it with a quick shot of Kicker. This way it stays in place and we can work further from here. Just going to take a little detour. I picked up this clear case half price at Hobby Lobby, and this is what we're going to use as the base. We're going to put the original base on top of here because we're going to paint this black. We're going to do something nice on the front, and it's also going to hide our electronics. Here's how it's going to be on top. Then we're going to add clay to it and grass and all sorts of stuff. When working with 3D prints, you really have to test your parts and make sure everything's cleaned up well, because a lot of times things don't fit well. Like you can see in the middle here, this gate is wobbly because that hole is not deep enough, and it's the same thing on both sides, so I'm going to have to drill down to make these fences fit. I ended up having to drill out the top hole and the middle hole. You can see the fence fits in there much better and isn't wobbly. Now I have to do the other side. We're going to be lighting up the pumpkins, so I had to find a way to mark the bottom, so I put my file through that has a point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to smack it with my razor saw. This way it leaves a mark in the bottom and I can see where to drill the hole. This way we can bring the wires through. And again, we're just going to do this on both sides. Back to working on the main base a little bit here. I have the power switch in the back, but more importantly, I use the holes from where we drilled to mark the place we're going to put the base on top. Otherwise, I'm not going to know where to put the wires in. So now that I have holes for my on-off switch and my power, it's time to scuff up the plastic. I'm using 400 grit and I'm just scuffing it off to give it nice scratches. This way when we prime it, the primer will stick to it, and that'll give us a good base coat for when we paint it black. The top of the base is a different story. I'm using 80 grit here to give it really deep scratches because I want the clay to be able to stick. If we don't really scuff it up and add lines into it or something like that, the clay may have a tendency not to stick and flake off later on. And if you do this, don't forget to scratch up your inside lid because we're going to have to light block and make sure no light leaks out of this. I did this on the other side. I just took the DAP Rapid Fuse, put it all over the bottom. This way we could get it ready and prepped to put into place on the base. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to spray. I'm going to open up the bottle of Kicker. I'm going to drop some Kicker in that well, and then I'm going to push the piece in there, just hold it in place for a few seconds. This way it's locked in and it's not going anywhere. Now that we have things together, this is what I'm talking about with 3D prints. You got to look for gaps. There's a huge gap between the bottom of the wall and the step. We're going to use Milliput in there again just to make it all nice and tidy, and it'll look much better. It's time to use Milliput for the first time on this build. I'm just cutting 2 equal parts. We're going to mush them together till they're one solid color, and then we're going to put them in the places we need. I have the Milliput in the gap that I need. I'm just using a toothpick. This way I could really shove it in there deep and make sure that gap is filled and we get no cracking or anything like that. I'm going to add some more Milliput over it, and then once that's done, I'm going to add the lines in to match up with the stone on the side and use a little water to smooth it out. And here's a quick time lapse so you can see everything I did. And yes, I used Milliput everywhere I could, filling in every little gap just to make this diorama look that much better. As you can see here, there were a lot of gap issues that we had to deal with, but in the end, it makes the diorama look so much better than having those gaps and making it look awkward. Next up was getting the pillars in the back and the gates to fit right. At first they didn't. The one on the left was way behind the one on the right, and it really didn't look good. I actually kind of had to pull the walls up front out a little bit and adjust them. This way I could get all of this to fit in. It took me a little bit of work, but I finally got them to where I wanted them. I just threw a little dap on there. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the kicker, I'm going to put it in the well. This way I could just push it in there and it'll set up and I don't have to get kicker everywhere. The gate is actually not glued onto the pillar. They're pressure fit. This way I can just close the gates or open them whichever way I want to see them in the diorama. And now that the pillars are on, you can see I was back to the milliput and plenty more gaps in there that we had to fill up. This way it makes it look better. Now it's one of the funnest parts of the diorama for me. I used my Cricut and I found the logo for The Nightmare Before Christmas. I put it on the Cricut, we cut it out, and now we're going to put this onto the transfer paper. We're just taking the squeegee, pushing it all down onto the transfer paper, and then we'll pull off the stencil and put it onto the front of the case. This is how the logo is going to look on the case. Once we get it on the transfer paper, we're going to put it onto the case, we're going to rub it down, peel it off, and then we're going to paint. Now that I finally got it to stick to the transfer paper, I have it on the case. We're just going to pull that transfer paper off gently and get this on here so we can get it looking good. And here we are, set up nice and neatly. Now to take care of a few things before we paint. I got the primer on around the case. The next thing up was I had to scratch up the surface. This way we can have that primer adhere to around the moon. I primed up around the moon and I also primed up the stencil, and now I'm going in with the black. This way I could get the lettering all done and that'll shine through once we put a light behind it. This way we could see Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. I have everything outside painted up in a flat black. Now we got to work on the inside. We have to make sure the inside is light blocked. So what I did was I just bought a sample of Dynasty Bear, and it's Midnight Black, I think it is, or something like that. And I'm not going to waste really good paint to light block. And now is the fun part. Not really. It's time to weed all this out and we can get to see the logo, and hopefully it came out well. And here we have it all unmasked. It's looking really good. I did chip up the corner a little bit there on the black, so I got to fix that. The next thing I'm going to do is take the Krylon frosted glass finish and spray this from the inside to make it look frosted. This way we can diffuse the light. And when I come back in the next video, we're going to start painting everything up.